right, good morning. Our learning, the time Masechta, is Le'ilui Nishmas Mindel Mariam Bas Kalman Ruvain her Neshama Shav and Aliyah. Okay, so we are on Daf Dalet at the 2 dots, and we have a very, I think, fascinating Gemara today. Let's see. So it says the Gemara, Gufa. We're going back to a comment that was made on Gimel Amud Beis in the middle of a discussion. Here we're going to analyze that discussion. That's what the word Gufa means. Baye Rabibi Barabaye. Rabibi Barabaye asked the following question. Hidbik pas b'tanor, if a person attaches bread to an oven, okay, on Shabbos, hitir lo lirdosa, do we permit the individual to take it off the oven, to take it out of the oven, kodem shiyav l'dechi of chatas, before the person comes to a situation where they would be chayav chatas, olo hitiru, or do they not permit it? Okay, and the Gemara is going to analyze what exactly is the case. But basically, there is a biblical prohibition. There is a isur d'oraisa to bake something, right? And that's one of the 39 malachos. There is a rabbinic prohibition of removing something from an oven. Okay, removing something from an oven in a typical scenario. Where it's not fully. There's a rabbinic prohibition. So the question is, am I allowed to do this prohibition of removing the bread from the oven before the person comes to a chiyav chatas or not? And the Gemara is now going to analyze what exactly is the scenario we're talking about. So Amar Rav Achabar Abayil Ravina, hey chidami, what is the case over here? Ilema b'shogeg, if you want to tell me the guy did it, the guy placed in the oven by mistake, velo idkerle, and the guy doesn't remember. In other words, he put it in the oven by mistake. He forgot of a Shabbos or whatever. He forgets a Shabbos, right? Puts it in the oven, and now he never remembers. So Laman Hitiru, who are we even talking to, right? If the guy still doesn't remember that it's Shabbos, then, we can't even begin a discussion. Can you take it out? Well, I can only take it out if the person realizes it's Shabbos. Ve'lavdi hadar ve'idkar. So you want to tell me the guy initially did not know it was Shabbos, and then he remembered it's Shabbos. Okay, mi mechayev. If the person put it in by mistake, and then now remembers that it's Shabbos, okay, and now is asking this question, can I take it out before I come to a chiyav chatas? And the Gemara, again, what was the way the Gemara framed the question? The question was framed as, can he take it out before he comes to a chiyav chatas? Okay, so the Gemara says, mi mechayev. In such a case where he did it initially by mistake, and now we're in a situation where he now remembers, would he really be chayav chatas? That's not. We learned in the Mishnah, or we're going to learn in the Mishnah, kol chayav chatos, einan chayavin, ad shtei tchilasan shgaga v'sofan shgaga. A person is not chayav chatas unless the beginning and end is b'shogeg. And over here, we're talking about a guy who in the beginning it was shogeg, but then he remembers. So the Gemara, again, the question was asked as, can he take it out before he's chayav chatas? But if he put it in by mistake and now he remembers, he would not be chayav chatas. That's not a situation that's chayav chatas, where a person's chayav chatas for. So Ella, rather, okay, new suggestion, b'mizid. We're talking about where a guy did it deliberately. Okay, meaning the person put it in, the person says, I don't care about Shabbos. I know it's Shabbos, I don't really care. And he puts it in the oven. And now he has charata, he has regret. And he says, can I take it out of the oven or not? I'm going to be liable, to be over a rabbinic prohibition in order to save me from the biblical prohibition. So the Gemara says, wait a second, then the text is wrong, the question was wrong, because then it should say, Kodem sheyavo lidei isser skila mi baile. It should say, can he take it out before he comes to a prohibition of skila? If he did it b'mezid, then he's chayav misa, not a chatas, and yet the Mishnah, not the Mishnah, but Rabibi Barabai, the way he asked the question was, can I put it in the oven, can I take it out before I come to a chiyav chatas? If we're talking about a guy who did it on purpose, it's not a chatas, it's skila, right? So we're going through all the different possible explanations, none of them seem to add up. Rav Shila, says Rav Shila, Olam b'shogeg. Really, we're talking about a case where the guy did it by mistake. Okay, and we said again, we said if he did it by mistake, what was the question then? Then either A, does he remember? If he doesn't remember, then what's even the question? And if he does remember, then you want to be chayav chatas. So Gemara says, Ulaman hitiru. So who are we even asking the question about? Who is it that we're possibly permitting to do this? La'acherim, for someone else. Okay, so what's the scenario? You have a roommate, and your roommate put something in the oven and then went for a jog, and you're like, oh my gosh, he thinks it's Sunday today, right? And you're like, wait, if he leaves in the oven and it starts baking and it's going to be baked, then he's going to be chayav chatas. So you are asking, can I, the roommate who is aware of the fact that it's Shabbos, take it out of the oven and prevent that person from being chayav chatas? Right, that's the question, right? That guy, your roommate's on his jog. He has no idea. If he just leaves it there, he's chayav chatas. He thinks it's Sunday right now, okay? So the question is, can you, the knowledgeable roommate, take it out to prevent the person from being chayav chatas? Now the question reads, can a person take it out if someone puts something in an oven? Are you, the friend, allowed to take it out before the other guy, the guy who initially put it in, before he's chayav chatas? Right? So the Gemara says, Maskif lo Rav Sheshes. Okay, and we're going to, Rav Sheshes asked the question. That can't be the question, because v'chi omrim la'adam chata Kidei sheyizkeh chavercha? Do we tell a person to sin in order to prevent, for your friend to gain? But the basic question over here is, and I want to come back to this line. Maybe we'll finish the Gemara, then we'll come back to this line because it's a fascinating concept. But the Gemara of Sheshis is asking that is it possible that we tell a person to sin in order to save their friend from sinning? That can't be. The Gemara over here just rejects that out of hand. Tosfos points out that there are a number of scenarios where it seems like we do actually sin partially in order to save someone else from sinning. Okay, so we'll come back to that point because it's a fascinating question, right? Or am I allowed to do something wrong in order to save you from doing something wrong? Yes, no. We can start thinking in the back of our mind as we continue the Gemara. Like, what svaras? What logic would there be to say yes? What logic would there be to say no? I want to come back to it because I find it to be a fascinating topic with some interesting ramifications, some interesting cases that have come up throughout history on this concept, on this topic of someone doing something wrong in order to save someone else from doing something even more wrong. Okay, but at this point, Rav Sheshis, from the simple read of the Gemara, Rav Sheshis is rejecting that. He says it can't be. It can't be that roommate takes it out and sins in order to save his friend from another sin. No way. Ella, therefore, Amar Rav Ashi says no. La'olam b'mezid. Really, we're talking about a case where it was done deliberately, meaning a guy puts it in his oven on purpose, says, I don't care about the fact that it's Shabbos. So the Gemara asked earlier, Ve'ema kodem, Ve'ema, Rav Ashi says, and you should therefore amend the text and say, Kodem sheyavo lidei iser skila. Really, Rabbi Bar Abai's question was not before you come to a chi of chatas, but the question is, a guy did it on purpose, and now he comes to us quickly, he says, I regret what I did. Can I go ahead and be in violation of this rabbinic prohibition in order to save me from the biblical prohibition? That was the question. So even though initially the way we understood the question was before he comes to Chi of Chatas, Rashi says, we have to amend the text. Maybe we misheard, the tradition of what Rabbi Bar Abaye said must have been wrong. The question wasn't about before he comes to a Chi of Chatas, rather the question was before he comes to a Chi of Skila.
So this is not talking about a Chi, we're back to the original person.
We're back to, correct, sorry. Yes, we're back to the original person, which is a fascinating question. A guy does something wrong, and now he regrets it. And do we say, okay, so first of all, of course, you could do, if a person regrets it, the question now is, do we allow the person to violate a rabbinic prohibition in order to save himself from something much more severe? That's the question Rabbi Bar Abaye was asking. Do we say, too bad? You cannot go back. You cannot be in violation of a prohibition. We can't permit you to do something wrong, even though it's going to save you from doing something even more wrong, right? The other possibility is, no, we say, no, you could do this smaller thing wrong in order to prevent you from doing the bigger thing wrong. It's okay. Interesting question. Amar Rabbi Bar Abaye, Rav Acha Brei Rava Masnila Behedya. Rav Acha Brei Rava he has this text. Rav Ashi amended the text. He says, no, this is exactly what his Masorah was. Amar Rabbi Bar Abaye. Rabbi Bar Abaye, the way he has the text, it was the following question. Hidbik Pas B'Tanor. Not as a question, but rather as a statement. Hidbik Pas B'Tanor. If a person goes ahead and illegally goes ahead and places bread in an oven on purpose, deliberately, hitir lo l'radosa kodem she'yava l'isur skila, we allow the person to violate the rabbinic prohibition in order to save him from the bigger prohibition. Beautiful thing, right? Basically, the Gemara concludes by telling us that if a person goes ahead and they sin, they did something wrong, we don't say, well, too bad. Too bad. No, if a person deliberately says, I don't care, I'm being Bechal Shabbos, and a minute later says, I want to do tshuva, I sinned, I did a terrible thing, we allow the person to be in violation of a rabbinic prohibition in order to save them from a chiyuv de'oraisa. Okay, and that's what the Gemara concludes. And we're going to come back to Rav Sheshis' question about having one person sin to save the other person, but first we'll just get to the bottom of the Amud, and then we'll come back to that point. Any questions, thoughts? Yeah?
Yeah, so there was just switching, that it wasn't asked as a question, it was meant more descriptive of what actually is the situation.
Rav Acha, correct. So yes, so let's quickly summarize. One way of having one tradition of Rabbi Bar Abaye was it was a query, it was a question, and it was an unresolved question, and we spent our time trying to figure out what exactly the question was. Ultimately, Rav Ashi concluded the question must have been by a guy doing it on purpose, and can he do a rabbinic prohibition, changes it, he realizes he made a mistake, he has charata, he has regrets, can he go ahead and do a rabbinic violation in order to save himself from the biblical one, and it's left as unresolved. And then Rav Acha Brei de Rava comes along and amends this. He doesn't have it as a question, he has it as a statement saying that yes, you can go ahead and violate a rabbinic prohibition in order to save yourself from a biblical prohibition. Good. Okay. New discussion, which we're going to start. We're not going to finish. Pasha ta'ani es yado. So here we are going back to the first cases of the Mishnah where we have someone doing something. Let's go back to the case where the poor person is placing his hand. Let's say he takes his basket from Rishus Rabbim, he takes a basket from Rishus Rabbim and he places it on the hands of the Baal Habayis, the guy standing inside. What do we say in that case? He is chayav. He's chayav, right? He did akira, he lifted it up, and by placing it on the hands of the balabayas, he does hanacha. The Gemara now asks the following question: Amai chayav? Why do we say that the ani is chayav in such a case? V'abi'inan akira v'hanacha me'al gabe makom dalid al dalid v'leika. You need to have both a lifting up and a placing down from a place that is 4 on 4 by 4 amos, v'leika, and we don't have such a thing because so what's this question? So there is this the way the Rambam understands is that there is a svara, there is a logical reason to argue that a item, in order to be called akira, to be lifting up from a place, or hanacha, placing it down somewhere, it really has to be on something we call a place. If it's going to be on something which is not so sturdy, you can't even call that. If I place something on the tip of the edge of this chair over here, right? Did I place it there? No, it's gonna fall at some point, right? It's not really placed somewhere. So the assumption is it has to really be placed on a thing, on something which is solid, and something which is sturdy. And without that, it's not really a hanacha, right? So the Rambam understands that there is a svara, there is a logic to say that it must be placed on something sturdy, or else it's not really a hanacha. And similarly, it can't be coming from a place that's not sturdy, or else it really wasn't taken from that place because it never really was there, right? So the Gemara asks, by placing it on the hands of the Baal Habayis, did you really ever place it down? Did you really ever place it down? It's not really ever placed down, right? So the Gemara answers, so Amar Rabba answers, Hamani Rabbi Akiva. We say no. The author of the Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva, the Amar, who said, Lo be'inan makom arba al arba, who teaches us that you don't actually, this idea, this assumption, that you need a place 4 by 4, Rabbi Akiva rejects this. Ditnan, we have a Mishnah. Hazorik mirshus, which proves this. Hazorik mirshus hayachid, or shus hayachid, or shus harabim me'emsa. Okay, you have a guy. He's standing in a private domain. Okay, and across the street from him is a private domain, but in the middle is a street, and it's not just a street; it's a highway. It's a full-fledged Rishus Harabim. And a guy takes a ball and he throws it from his private domain to his neighbor's private domain, and it passes the Rishus Harabim in the middle. Okay, was there ever hanacha in the Rishus Harabim? No, he has a good shot. He threw it properly from one side to the other, right? However, Rabbi Akiva mechayev, the Chacham potrim. Rabbi Akiva says you're chayev in such a case, and the Chachamim say you are exempt. Why does Rabbi Akiva say you're chayev? The Gemara explains. Rabbi Akiva savar amrinan kluta kemi shehuncha damya. Rabbi Akiva says that when an object is what's a good word? It is like captured. It's captured. There's a better word which I'm blanking on it now. Okay, it's captured in the public domain. It is encompassed in the public domain. Still not the word I'm looking for, and therefore that's as if it is on the ground. Okay, that's the simple way to read it. The Rikiva is saying that when it's in the ground, in the air, it's as if it's on the ground. Now the ground is dalid al dalid, right? The ground has the proper space, and as long as it's in the air space, then it's enough to be considered that it's on the ground. Tzvi, what is it? What does the Gemara, the article say for Kluta? Contained. There we go. Fantastic. Okay, so it's contained. Once it's contained in that airspace, it's as if it's on the ground. Therefore, you have dalid al dalid. That's the way.
It's lower than 10.
We'll assume it's lower. Yeah, we're going to get good, excellent points. The Gemara next time, which we're going to focus on tomorrow, is going to get into the whole question of how high it was, this and that. But let's assume right now let's ignore that point. We'll come back to that point. But the basic principle is, as long as it's in the airspace, it's as if it's on the ground, and therefore it's dalad dalad. Similarly, Rabbi Akiva would say the guy's hand, the balabai's hand, although it's not dalad al dalad, but it's in the airspace, and therefore it's like it's on dalad al dalad. Now, I would point out Tosfos has a slightly different way of understanding this idea. Tosfos says it's not that we treat it like it's on the ground. Rather, we see from Rabbi Akiva that he doesn't care about dalad al dalad, right? It doesn't read as well, I believe, in the simple read of the Gemara, but he doesn't say kemisha huncha damya, but rather we see, since Rabbi Akiva holds that as long as it's kluta, as long as it's contained in the airspace, it's as if their hanacha was made. So basically, we see from Rabbi Akiva, you don't need a place of dalad al dalad. I don't know a nafkamina, but conceptually, there is a different way of understanding. One is saying it's as if it's on the ground. The other is saying, I don't need it to be on the ground. Either way, Rabbi Akiva would say, if it's on the hands, You don't. It would be a sufficient hanacha, no different than if it's in the airspace, right? So again, Rabbi Kiva Savar Abrinan Kluta Kamishun Chadamya, being contained is as if it's placed down. For Rabbanan Savri, Lo Abrinan Kluta Kamishun Cha. We don't say such a thing that when it's contained, it's like it is placed on the ground. Okay, and the Gemara now asks, Lamemar the Pshita LeRab the Kluta Kamishun Chadamya. Fine. That's already the next Gemara, which we're going to analyze. This principle, because there are some questions about Rabbi Kiva's Shita, and that's going to take us to Dalet Amud Beis. I want to go back. Should we see Tosfos inside? Yeah, let's try to see a little bit of Tosfos inside on Daf Dalet Amud Aleph. This idea of telling a person to sin, we'll come back to the Rabbi Kiva discussion, God willing, tomorrow. So let's see Tosfos V'chi omrim lo la'adam chata b'shvil sheyiskeh chavercha. You see that? Says Tosfos, Ad Amar b'Bechal Ma Ravin, Rabbi Savar Nichalei lechaver de la'avid isura klila v'la'avid amaretz isura rabba. Okay, so he asks, wait a second, you see there's an explicit Gemara in Eruvin which says that it's ideal, Rebbe says, that it's better for the chaver, the Talmid Chacham, to go ahead and perform a small sin in order to prevent the amaretz from a great sin. Okay, so basically, you see a person, without getting too much into the context, we're going to get a little bit more into the context in a second. You see a person is sinning in order to prevent someone else from sinning. Rav Sheshes rejected this out of hand. Rav Sheshes said, no, there's no way I could sin in order to prevent someone else from sinning. But he says you do. So Tosfos answers, Hasam k'dei shelo yochal amaretz tevel al yado. Okay, there we're talking about where the guy himself, the chaver, he's the one who messed up, right? It is because of him that, meaning I'm the one who is causing someone else to sin. A guy's selling items, whatever it is, he's causing someone else to sin, right? There, I could go ahead and do a small sin to prevent someone else from doing a big sin that I caused, right? That's very different than the case of my roommates, right? My roommate put something in and he left the house. I had nothing to do with it. Should I come along and go ahead and prevent the guy from sinning? Whoa, who says I should do such a thing? But to go ahead and prevent someone from sinning that I cause, I'm enabling someone, not enabling, I'm causing someone to sin, there I'm allowed to sin small to prevent the guy from doing something big, okay? Damar lo, let's just skip to V'omer Riva. V'omer Riva, another answer. V'omer Riva, a couple lines down. Dafilu madbik atzmo, ein livsha misham lahatir, dahasam adayin lo nasa iser, Mutav shiyasa iser kav lo yasa iser chamor al yado, aval hacha ma'isel iser kvar nasa, Mele Yigmar, Lo Yasif Ilisar Kav Yadayim. Sorry, I'll just keep on reading. I just want to go to his next answer. Okay, actually, just go to Shani Pir of Irivia. Okay, the Gemara has another question from another Gemara where one is freeing a slave. A person is freeing a slave in order to do a mitzvah. So it sounds like, once again, freeing a slave, a Aved Kanani would be an Isser, would be in violation of an Isser, and you're doing so and the Gemara over there is talking about doing it for another mitzvah, for doing it for another, to prevent another Avera. So the Gemara says, Shani Pir of Arivia, de mitzvah rabba hi, because it is a great mitzvah. You know what, we're going to do the rest of this Tosfos outside, because I realize we're not going to get through it properly. So I'll just share with you a couple of different answers. There's a couple of Gemaras which indicate that a person is allowed to sin to save a person from sinning. Okay, so there's a number of the Gemara, the Rishonim suggests a number of different reasons, a number of different ways of understanding how this works. Some say, like the Riva that I just very briefly and didn't improperly went through. The Riva says that a person is allowed to sin for either mitzvah derabim or a mitzvah rabba. In other words, if I'm doing it, I'm allowed to do something wrong if it's going to enable the masses to do a mitzvah or to do a great mitzvah. Okay, or one person to do a great mitzvah, right? So that's one principle. We'll see some practical examples of that. We already saw Tosfos says, if I'm the cause of the sin, I could do a small sin to prevent someone else from sinning. I'll give you one example that the Mishnah Berurah brings down. Let's say a person's davening, and a person realizes that there's excrement in the vicinity. Everyone's davening. We're in a minyan, and everyone's davening, and one guy realizes there's excrement over here, right? Now, middle of Shemona Esrei, right? So it's Isser D'Oraisa to daven in the midst of excrements, right? It's also Isser D'Rabbanan to speak in the middle of davening. Says the Mishnah Berurah, I'm allowed to go ahead and speak, tell everyone, stop davening, or whatever it is, tell someone, go get the janitor, or whatever it is, and speak Isser D'Rabbanan in order to save the rabbim from the Isser of davening next to that excrement, right? So that's one example where small sin D'Rabbanan, in order for the rabbim. So that's one application of the Mishnah Berurah. There is another qualification, the Mishnah Berurah, that there's a machlokas between the Gra and the Mishnah Berurah about the following case. The Mishnah Berurah talks about a case where an individual is going ahead to sin. a person is like going to go l'shmat is the example. In other words, the Gemara talks about a case where this woman, the Mishnah Berurah talks about a case where this woman is basically going, leaving the community on Shabbos, and she's going to some church, some monastery, whatever it is, and you have the ability to save her. Okay, are you allowed to go? And it's chutz l'tchum, it's outside the tchum. Am I allowed to go chutz l'tchum to save her? To prevent her? I know I could persuade her not to. Okay, you can persuade her not to. You're allowed to go outside the tchum in order to save her, to prevent her from going ahead and doing so. So the Mishnah Berurah says, yeah, of course, you have an obligation. Why? Because it's mitzvah rabbah. She's going to go and reject all of Judaism. It's not just one thing. It's all the mitzvahs. You're going to prevent her from doing all that. Whereas the Gra, the Gra obviously comes before the Mishnah Berurah. He suggests that it's only when that you have it's a mitzvah derabim, or it's a great mitzvah, and it's something where the person was not posheh. They didn't do it on purpose. They're doing something by mistake, right? Which is more similar to our Gemara's case. When a person's sinning deliberately, then I'm not allowed to do so. And therefore, the Gra would say in such a case, this woman is going deliberately, willingly, going ahead and doing so. So to go ahead and save her, you would not be allowed to violate a prohibition, only if we're talking about a case where someone's doing something by mistake, and it's a mitzvah rabbah, great mitzvah, or it's a mitzvah of the rabbim, it's a mitzvah of the congregation, then I'd be allowed to do so. One more way of dealing with some of these questions. The Ritva says the most interesting way of reconciling these Gemaras. The Ritva says that he focuses on the terminology that Rav Sheshes uses. Do you tell someone to sin in order to save their friend? He says, of course, you're allowed to sin to save someone else from sinning. But you cannot paskin that way. You don't tell someone to do so. Right? We have a number of cases where we don't tell someone. It'd be inappropriate for us to say, you should do this. Right? If someone comes to us and say, should I sin in order to save someone from sin? No, you don't do that, right? But can a person do so? Is it permitted to do so? The answer is yes. That's how the Ritva reconciles these Gemaras. You have a couple of Gemaras where a person is going ahead and sinning in order to prevent a greater sin or whatever it is. There, it's because the person did so. And it's mutter. And it's allowed. But to tell someone to do so would not be allowed. Okay? So that's a couple of ways of reconciling these Gemaras. I guess a question to ask, and at least one Achron asked this question is, really, the svara should be that you should do so. In other words, there is a concept of arvos, that I'm responsible, just like I'm responsible for your mitzvahs, to ensure you do mitzvahs, I'm responsible to prevent you from doing averos. Why wouldn't I? Meaning, arvos says that basically we're one and the same to one extent. We're one body, we're one organism. So why wouldn't I go ahead and, in as much as I would go ahead and perhaps do a bigger avera to prevent myself from doing a smaller avera, why wouldn't I do the same for you? Why wouldn't that same principle exist? Right? Meaning there's a logical question to say that Rav Sheshes is wrong. Really, I should be able to go ahead and sin in order to save you from sinning. Because just like I should sin to save myself from a bigger sin, so too I should do a small sin to save you from big sin, since we're all connected. Thoughts?
Don't we say who says his life is greater than
Good. So I was wondering the same thing. I was wondering if you would say the same svara Rabbi Kiva, the famous Gemara about a person traveling with one bottle of water, right? And they split it, and basically have a svara of chayecha kodmin. There's a general principle that yes, I am responsible for you, but there is a hierarchy where I first am responsible for myself, and then I'm responsible for you. We normally focus on that for material things, for tzedakah, things like that. But perhaps what we're seeing in this Gemara is that there's a spiritual principle, there's a spiritual application for this as well. That yes, it's true. I am responsible to make sure you don't sin, but my responsibilities come first. Chayecha kodmin, which, by the way, I would point out that there is a huge machlokes, and it seems like, at least according to the Tziv and others, about am I allowed to risk my life to save someone else? Right? Some poskim say absolutely not, but some say I'm not obligated, but I'm allowed to do so, which would be somewhat similar to the Ritva's svara over here. In other words, I'm allowed. So right, there's a question of someone's drowning in a pretty heavy, choppy waters. Am I allowed to jump into the water? Am I obligated to jump in the water? Many would say I'm not obligated, but I'm allowed to do so. Right? We don't tell the person to do so, but they are allowed to do so, which would be kind of similar to the way the Ritva is going over applying things over here, saying I'm not obligated to do so. Right? Chayecha kodmin. My life is first, but I would be allowed to do so. I'd be allowed to risk my life for others, and it's not identical, but I wonder if it's a similar principle, and maybe that's where some of this discussion is coming from a similar principle of chayecha kodmin, that I don't sin for you because my life comes first, but maybe I'm allowed to do so because in a similar vein. Okay, have a wonderful day.